I had to go into a mental hospital in 2017 due to my OCD, and this is the story of how I got to that point. I thought I'd give you the full rundown of like what happened, what the mental hospital was like, what my first exposures were. I've mentioned elements and parts of my stories in other YouTube videos with NOCD, but I thought I'd go a bit more in depth. So I just transferred to the University of New Hampshire for my sophomore year of college. My first year of college was actually spent in Berklee College of Music in Boston, but because I found music to be just a hobby and my mental health was like rapidly declining, especially being in the city with so many triggers, at that time I obviously assumed that moving schools would help me and help my mental health. Because when you think about it, in my brain at the time, especially with my OCD, I'm like, if I change places, I leave behind like my old rituals, the places that I used to avoid. I have a new space and I haven't like emotionally contaminated these people or this area yet. I do want to say emotional contamination is where your brain convinces you that certain people, places, or objects kind of carry this sort of bad energy. And then you fear that that bad energy or bad vibes will then rub off on you or get inside of you. So for me, it would leave me feeling tainted even if I just like touched somebody that was emotionally contaminated. Anytime you come in contact with a person, place, or object that you deem to be emotionally contaminated, you then feel tainted or poisoned. It's an invisible, irrational sense of being infected. And it's almost always typically involving like qualities or associations that you desperately do not want. I honestly forget what happened that made me emotionally contaminate UNH before I actively went there, but I contaminated it all. Like I'm talking the merch, the campus, the people, the emails, anything attached to the University of New Hampshire, I deemed as like dirty. I did not want it in my sight. I did not want to talk about it, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I remember my aunt was like, I want to take a trip to UNH. I want to see the place that you're going to go to college. My dad was like, I'll drive you up. We can all like do a trip together. And I refused to go. I remember watching them go through my window and being like, why can't people just stop talking about this? Why are they so interested? I'm obviously nervous about going. I have never been able to hide my emotions very well. And I had made it very clear with my energy and my body language and lack of words when answering that like I was nervous about going. Or I had thought that I had made it obvious that I wanted people to stop talking about it. But what my parents took it as they were really frustrated with me, obviously. Because in their mind, not only have I made this big to-do about transferring, but it's obviously a massive privilege to be able to go to college, and I was coming across like a spoiled brat, probably, in their eyes. My roommate list came out. I had 3 roommates. We basically had 2 rooms and then a shared common area, and there was this one girl in particular that I got like such bad energy from. I was checking all of their Instagrams, basically. Now, don't quote me, but I think the reason why I severely emotionally contaminated this girl was because when I was scrolling through her Instagram, I think I saw her dressing up as like a demon or something for Halloween, and at the time my religion scrupulosity was just out of this world bad. Yeah, regardless, it was something like that I deemed as blasphemous or blasphemy or whatever it's called. So in my head, it was a new fear unlocked because I'm like, the enemy is going to be living with me. She's literally going to be in the other room. So I felt very trapped, and I found it extremely difficult to kind of push through that fear and anxiety. An important aspect to also understand about OCD is our bodies react to thoughts as though they are like actually happening and like actually reality. So my body genuinely reacted as though my roommate was going to be an actual demon. Leading up to going to UNH, my anticipatory anxiety was through the roof. Was not having a great time. But when I got to the campus, I remember still being very closed off and being very standoffish to my roommates. I remember making a few acquaintances because I had transferred and there was like a bunch of new transfers, and we had all kind of went to school early and gotten to know each other and everything. And I had met a few people where I was like, oh yeah, okay, like I can hang out with them. I was still very much not in a good headspace, if you will, but I was trying to, cope with the feelings that I was feeling. I think I was there for either 1 to 2 weeks, and then I went home for the weekend because my mom, she used to be a Patriots cheerleader, and they had her back as like an alum to dance on the field to start off the season, if you will. And at that game is actually, funny enough, where I hit rock bottom. I have a lot of magical thinking, and at that time, my whole thought process was, if you see this number, something bad's going to happen. And I would do these things where if I was in the car, I'd be like, okay, if you see this specific number on a license plate, something bad's going to happen. And I would do that all the time. And obviously, if you keep doing that, like odds are something's going to happen. And basically that happened in that instance where I saw the number. And in that instance, I was like, no matter what, if you see this number, you're going to hell and you will literally never see your friends and family again. And that just sent me. If you want to hear like a more in-depth version of that story and like the actual details, details because genuinely it was like actually really traumatizing. I did a video on that specifically. It's called The Day My OCD Broke Me, and that's also on OCD's page. I literally cried in the video because it was the first time I actually ever talked about it. But because there's the video there, I won't go into that in this video because then this would just be too long. But that instance in particular was my breaking point and when I snapped, if you will. I went back to school and I couldn't stop crying. I was crying all the time. I remember I would be talking to somebody and then the second they would leave, I'd need to run to the bathroom so I could just start crying. I would start sobbing and I'd have a panic attack. Like, this wasn't just like, oh my God, tears. I was hysterical. I went to a therapist on campus and she literally was like, go home. Straight up just told me to leave campus. And I was like, no, my parents, they're not gonna let me, you know, and because I had asked my parents, I'm like, I need to go home. And they were like, no, absolutely not. You're staying, you're pushing through, you got this. And I did not got that. I did not got this. I physically didn't realize that the human body could go that dark and be that sad. It was as low and as hopeless as I think somebody could possibly be. It was the type of feeling that made you not want to be alive. I've had those feelings like before, but this was another level. There was not an ounce of hope, an ounce of relief, any sort of escape. Like, I saw zero light at the end of this tunnel. I genuinely would rather have every single one of my fingers and toenails pulled off than go through that again. There is not a medieval torture method that I have come across that is worse than the feeling that I felt. Then on top of all of that and that emotion, my OCD was raging. The best way I can describe what my OCD felt like, and it had felt like this for a while, but like imagine it on steroids, was I constantly felt like I was on the lookout for a murderer. That's how like twitchy I was and on alert, and I was constantly looking out for signs, constantly looking for every little thing that I could find that like could potentially be dangerous to me. I was so jumpy. Like if a car horn beeped, that's my day done. I was constantly just on the lookout, and my thoughts were so loud, I was fully hearing voices. And if you think I'm being dramatic right now, I have not even touched the surface. I can't do this feeling and this experience justice. There are no words that I could possibly find to describe it. But anyway, I obviously love school, and now I'm going to kind of just like go into the part where I jump into the mental hospital. Went to the mental health hospital, and I was doing an outpatient program for a month, and that is where they gave me the book Imp of the Mind, which helped me understand what OCD looked like, and it honestly helped me mentally prepare for exposure and response prevention therapy. I remember doing a tour of the hospital, and I remember thinking, like, as long as that's not the building that I'm going to be staying in, like, I'm okay. Once again, magical thinking. Basically, the reason I thought that is because it looked older and spookier, and I had this religious scrupulosity, and I very much believed in ghosts, and to be honest, still gonna do. Yeah, I got a spooky energy, and I emotionally contaminated that building. Not as intensely as I did UNH, obviously, and you have to also understand that most people, places, things, objects at this point were being emotionally contaminated. Like, I was not wearing certain shirts, I was throwing away clothes, I was like, everything that basically came in contact with me was very prone to being emotionally contaminated. But of course, that was the building that I was going to be staying in. So that was honestly my first exposure. And that building is the inpatient unit. The outpatient unit was in another building. I ended up being there for about a month. It was this time 8 years ago in October. It's crazy for me to think about that, to be honest. My parents flew up to drop me off and move me into the hospital. As I said, it was an older building. I shared my room with one other person. It was kind of like dorm-esque style. There was a communal dining area, and it was also like a common area space. They provided, breakfast, lunch, dinner. We were able to freely walk the grounds, but we weren't able to, we had to get permission to leave the campus. The ages when I was there, I think ranged between 18 years old to 70, maybe 75. Every morning we had a group meeting where we'd state our goals for the day. We were given a timetable from basically 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and you would attend these classes. Either that or you would do individual therapy. I also did another video on OCD's channel where I went through my hospital notes and my schedule if you wanted to check that out. That video is called Going Through My OCD Recovery Journal from the Hospital - 8 years later. At that point, I had been put on very strong medication, and so I was a lot less flinchy and terrified of my own shadow, if you will. I remember being really terrified of ERP and getting to the point where I almost didn't do it. But to be honest, my reality brain came in so strong, and it was like, if you don't do this, you are going to be like this forever. So I just was like, you have a choice. You can stay like this and you can prolong your suffering, or you can give every ounce of yourself, and if it does not work, you have permission to be done. And I know that's very morbid and very dark, but to be honest, it was in my head, I was done anyway. It was a very silent promise. Obviously, I haven't told anybody that until probably this year, but it lit a fire under me because I meant it. And to be at that point where you are debating putting your sadness on other people, like the people that love you, and when you are in that much despair, it's one of the most devastating places that you can ever be. Mind you, I also had suicidal ideation. Like my entire childhood, the only thing I wanted to do was leave the planet, but I never even thought of actually doing it because I didn't want to put that pain on the people I would rather suffer. And it had gotten to the point where I physically felt I couldn't suffer anymore. In my head, the moment I entered the inpatient unit was my day one. I was gonna have no days off, no excuses, and I was not going to avoid anything. In my head, it was a blessing because the worst thing that could have ever possibly happened had already happened. Like in my head, I was going to hell. I was never going to see any of my friends and family again. My soul was gone. So I was like, honestly, what do I have to lose? I've already lost everybody I love in my OCD brain. So I mentally prepared myself to do anything and everything that my therapists were telling me to do. Where I was staying, it was called McLean Hospital, and the unit I was in was called the OCDI, but it didn't have like your stereotypical mental hospital vibe. At the end of the day, it's a treatment center. And I feel like mental hospitals get such a bad rap because there are some units that are very dangerous and scary and violent, but most mental illnesses only hurt the people who have them. In my opinion, mental hospitals are one of the most impactful and beneficial places in the entire world. They're literally dedicated to help people who have not been able to help themselves and cope on their own. Like, what a gift a place like this is to solely focus on healing yourself. It's honestly such a beautiful thing, and I think it's just such a beautiful experience that I got to have. It was one of the most special things to ever happen to me, honestly. As I said before, I have scrupulosity OCD, so it's religion based and centered around being like a good person. I've had a few subtypes of OCD, but that was the one that really took me down. Some exposures that I would do with my one-on-one therapist, I would say trigger words for me, swearing at God, that was a big one that I had to do. I actually had to talk about things that scared me because in the past I wouldn't talk about things that scared me because I would be terrified that if I spoke it, it would become reality. To be honest though, the majority of my exposures I actually had to do on my own because if someone told me to do an exposure, my OCD told me that it was actually okay to do. Therefore, I actually didn't have much anxiety about doing it. And I could have gotten away with it. I could have let my therapist, guide me in the exposures. But at the end of the day, I was not there for things to be easy. I was there for things to get better. And if I got reassurance in that moment and someone told me to do something, if it was an exposure or otherwise, that wasn't my decision. And therefore, God would know that, and therefore I'm safe. The biggest thing that helped me with my religious exposures was a huge moment that I had with the very first therapist I talked to. He didn't end up being my therapist, but I had one session with him and my parents were involved, and it was right before I went into the OCDI. He basically told me, he was like, I need you to swear at God. And I was like, is that okay if I swear at God? And he was like, is it okay? And I was like, okay, you're not giving me reassurance, therefore no, I'm absolutely not doing that. I will never forget. And he turned to my mom and he goes, if Dee needed to swear at you or say the worst things possible about you, and you knew that her doing it would help her get better, would you want her to do it? And my mom was like, I would want you to do anything it takes to get better. And then he turned to me and he was like, okay, so is your mom better than God? If God is this all-knowing being that you think they are, why are you scared? And something just kind of clicked with me because he basically was saying, you are babying God. You are taking offense on behalf of God. If God is all powerful, all knowing, all accepting, he knows what's your true intention and what's in your heart. I look back to 8 years ago and I remember being really terrified that exposure therapy was gonna have me lose my faith and lose my religion and stuff. But I am still very much religious, but it's a very personal journey, and my religion now is based on love and acceptance. And if I can accept this person, of course God will be able to accept this person. Or if I can accept other religions and other people and love these people, of course God can do the same. I always say I have my own religion going on, and it's based in love instead of fear, or acceptance rather than persecution. Whether it's right or not, that is what I believe. Anyway, a few other things that I did is I watched The Exorcist in my bed because I was like, if I wanted to emotionally contaminate my bed is my safe space, and if anything touches my bed that I don't like, it's contaminated. And The Exorcist would have contaminated my computer, and therefore I put my computer on my bed, so it would contaminate my bed as well. Basically, I was trying to make myself as uncomfortable as possible so I could later on be comfortable and make myself have more of a tolerance for anxiety. Basically, what I was trying to do is throw myself into being uncomfortable all the time. That way my baseline for anxiety was a lot higher. I was not told to do that. I just figured it out that it worked really well. I kind of say like 2 months of being uncomfortable the whole time is worth the 2 years you get of feeling free. Obviously with tune-ups and continuing to work at it, but if you throw yourself into being uncomfortable all of the time, you see results and you see them fast. Other exposures I would do is I looked into every single religion, and I'm talking every single one, the scariest ones that you can possibly think of. I looked into those, and funny enough, when I was like looking into them, a lot of them actually weren't scary. Like my anticipatory anxiety had thought they were different than what they actually preached. Really, really weird, actually. My main exposure therapy, though, would have been centered around my magical thinking, because my brain was constantly on the loop of, if you don't do this, this will happen. That is kind of what I mean by every single aspect of my life was dictated by OCD, because I couldn't open a door without having a compulsion or having an intrusive thought due to magical thinking. Some examples of magical thinking: if you don't touch this doorknob again, you're gonna die. If you say this, you're gonna jinx it. If you talk about what you're feeling, it's gonna become a reality. If you buy this, every time you wear it, you'll have bad luck. If you don't share every single detail about what happened, you're lying. So basically my exposures for that were anytime magical thinking came up, I would try to do the opposite of what it was telling me to do. I once came across a bridge that you could walk across, and immediately my brain was like, you cannot walk across this. Like, if you walk across this, something horrific is going to happen. I always use anxiety as a warning and to utilize it instead of being a victim of it. I'm like, okay, how can I utilize this anxiety? I can walk across the bridge and make myself stronger instead of giving into it and making myself feel weaker. As I said before, I started seeing results rapidly. I was literally told by one of the therapists that I had gotten better faster than anybody that they'd ever seen, from being as bad as I was to getting to the point where I was then. And mind you, like, this was a OCD specific unit. Like, everybody there had OCD, and they told me this. And I swear to you it was because of this all or nothing mindset I had. I did not wait for it to be exposure time, because we literally had exposure time. I did not wait for that. I took it upon myself to make every hour, every minute, every day of my life exposure time. In my head, I had really firmly cemented in there, you have one choice. You do it, you do what they're telling you to do, or you do not get better. You live with the consequences of that. It's your choice. And it was my choice. And I made the right decision. The more ERP I did, the braver I became, the braver I felt. Now, also keep in mind, I was very much not perfect. I was still very much doing compulsions on the day-to-day basis. It would have been physically impossible for me to stop doing every single compulsion, because even to this day, some compulsions I do are habitual. I don't even realize sometimes I'm doing them until after I've done them, especially the mental ones. But I was trying, and I wasn't avoiding, and I was doing as many as possible. Whenever I could, wherever I could. I was trying to no longer have clean or safe spaces. I was basically in the process of emotionally contaminating my entire life, so I could just embrace it and live with it, feel the fear, and do it anyway. I was pushing myself to the absolute brink, which, funny enough, I never really got to the brink, because the more exposures I did, the more I realized that I was going to be okay. Then I started becoming angry that my OCD was trying to keep me from living my life. I was like, oh, you're full of it. I remember being asked by other people in the hospital how I was doing it. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really know how to vocalize what I was doing. I also didn't want to jinx it. Compulsion. Nor, to be honest, was I ready to openly speak about anything. So my main advice to everybody was like, just do exposure therapy outside of exposure therapy time. Don't give yourself a break. Don't avoid what they tell you to do. And I will literally never forget this. This girl literally said to me, I wish I had your OCD. It would be so much easier. And not to bash on her OCD, but I had already had her subtype of OCD. In my opinion, I had already moved on to things a lot more petrifying, and that affected my life a lot more. But I didn't say that because I was very aware when you're in that state of pain, the last thing you want to do is put your pain on other people, in my experience. And in the same swing, I was like, I don't want to put my frustration on her, because obviously she's hurting and she's struggling. And I basically just told her, I was like, well, you are refusing to do exposures that you're doctor is telling you to do. If you stop refusing and you do what they tell you to do, you will start seeing results and you will start getting better. I said it in a nicer way, but it's been seared into my brain as one of the most insulting and demeaning things that was said to me. Because mind you, no one in that hospital knew my story. By the time I got to the inpatient unit, I was severely medicated. They weren't even aware of what my subtype was. I am very much a person of like, I don't tell people what I'm doing until I've done it. I don't like talking about the process. I like talking about what I did once I figured out what I needed to do. Not to brag, but they just knew me as the girl that was absolutely kicking butt in this program. They didn't know that I had this secret deal with myself that if things didn't go the way I needed them to go, they didn't know how morbid things were getting. This girl wasn't there the first 19 years of my life where I didn't feel accepted and couldn't get happy. I just remember thinking, like, I'm not in a mental health hospital because I'm thriving. I just made the decision and I stuck with it, and you would never catch me complaining. And I had complaints. I had a lot of complaints, but you would not catch me vocalizing them. And here's another thing I can't stress enough is to not complain when you're doing something hard, because it will only make it worse. And I'm not talking about complaining about your struggles or like relating to people about that. That's not what I'm talking about. If you're frustrated with the disorder, you should talk about it. You should relate about it. What you should not complain about is the therapy that is saving your life. Do not bite the hand that is literally feeding you. So the more you complain about it, the more you're not going to want to do it. And the reason I'm saying this is because I watched it happen. I've always been a people watcher. I've always observed, taken what I liked, left what I didn't. And I was watching people complain about it and using it as an excuse to not do things. I did not once complain about my exposures. I just did it. Also, can I just like go back for a second and just say that nobody's OCD theme is worse than somebody else's? Our bodies are all reacting in the same visceral, compulsive, life-ruining way, or else you would not be in therapy or in a hospital. Excuses, avoidance, and wishing for something different, or blaming somebody else or wanting somebody else's subtype is not going to help you get any better. Because I promise you, if you had that subtype, you would still be feeling the same. It's just the harsh reality of living the disorder is like one person's subtype might seem stupid to me, but it's not stupid to them. My subtype might seem stupid to somebody else, but it's not stupid to me. My biggest piece of advice is not only learn from your mistakes, but learn from the mistakes of others. Whether that's in person, through self-help books, online, it will only help you get better faster. And I feel like that's something that people with OCD often avoid because we're scared of triggering ourselves. Trigger yourself. Anyway, the last part probably came across a little preachy, but I'm so passionate about it. Like that is my main reason why I have gotten to the point where I no longer reach the requirements for OCD. And it's because I've just tried so hard to make this a somewhat positive experience and something I'm proud to look back on. And I want you to learn from my trial and error and the trial and error that I saw in others. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to my experience. If you are somebody that you know is struggling with OCD, go to NOCD.com. Thank you so much for watching.